What if I told you that after just one mission, the Expanse Osiris Reborn already feels like one of the most promising sci-fi RPGs I've played in quite a while? Because after playing the beta, that's honestly where I'm at. And yes, I know, it's only the opening mission. It's only about an hour of gameplay. There's no real gameplay on Eros itself, so details there are still pretty limited. But even with that in mind, this first test of the game did a lot right. In some ways, it feels very much like Mass Effect. The cover-based combat, the movement, the dialogue, and the choices that you're given, and the squad-based structure. You can absolutely feel that DNA in it. But at the same time, it feels like The Expanse. It feels more grounded, more tense, and more fragile. There's a harder sci-fi edge to everything. The stakes feel immediate. The danger feels real. And that mix is exactly why this first hour worked so well for me. Before I go any further, I want to give you full disclosure. I'm an Owlcat partner, and I was given access to the beta last month. But these are still my genuine first impressions after playing through its opening mission, and honestly, it left me wanting a lot more. The beta takes place right at the beginning of the story, just after you and your twin Jay have narrowly escaped Eros on a stolen frigate. You return to Pinkwater 4 Station, and right away, the game starts building tension in a way I thought worked really well. You meet Zafar first, then Larry and Luciana, and eventually report to your boss, O'Connell. You explain what happened on Eros, how your whole crew was lost, including your commanding officer, Captain Barros, and how your ship, the Piranha, was destroyed. Now that setup matters, because the mission doesn't waste time. It gets you grounded just long enough to understand the situation, and then everything starts to unravel. There's even a small moment where you mention a blip on the radar to Larry, and he kind of brushes it off. At the time, it seems minor. Then Protogen attacks the station, and suddenly that little detail clicks. That's one of the first things that I liked about this mission. It escalates naturally. It doesn't just throw explosions at you immediately. It gives you a bit of breathing room, lets you meet a few people, gives you just enough context to settle in, and then flips the table. From there, the entire mission keeps building. Protogen attacks. O'Connell realizes they're probably all dead anyway if Protogen thinks that word got out about Eros, and he agrees to fight back. You escape his office just before Protogen breaks in, and the station turns into a war zone. Now that progression is a big reason the beta felt really great. It's not just one combat encounter after another. The mission keeps changing its rhythm in a way that keeps you engaged. It starts with a debrief, shifts into a sudden escape, pushes you through interior fights, throws you out into space for zero-G traversal, and then pulls you back inside as the station is coming apart around you before ending in a desperate final escape. That constant change kept it engaging. And on the gameplay side, this is where the Mass Effect comparison really starts to show. I played as an Earther officer, and the combat immediately clicked for me. On the hardest difficulty especially, this really felt like a game that wanted me to use cover properly, think about my positioning, and move with some purpose. I couldn't just stand in the open and trade damage. I had to actually respect the fight, and that made the combat feel a lot more intuitive. The officer's abilities also felt strong. They gave me enough utility to feel like I had meaningful tools, but not so much that it completely overshadowed the gunplay. It still felt like a third-person shooter at its core, just one layered with abilities and squad coordination. Now, I mainly cover Star Citizen, but sci-fi RPGs have always been one of my favorite genres, so if you enjoy immersive sci-fi worlds, detailed first impression reviews, and games like this that genuinely look promising, make sure you're subscribed. Now, one criticism I do have is that you're pretty limited in how much you can upgrade your skills in this beta. The upgrade system itself felt pretty basic from what I played. It's there, and it does add something, but it doesn't feel especially deep in this test. But with that said, it's a beta, and it's only the opening mission. so I'm not treating this like some major red flag yet. It's more just something I noticed. And if there was one section of the mission that really convinced me Owlcat has something interesting here, it was the zero-G gameplay. This was probably one of the standout parts of the whole beta for me. Once you make your way outside the station, the game starts doing some really cool things. There's even a zero-G puzzle section out there, though it's not exactly obvious on the first run. I actually didn't find it until I explored more on my 4th playthrough. But once I did, I thought it was a really great addition. It can feel a little disorienting at first, but in a way that helps sell the environment, the danger, and the feeling of actually being out in space. More than anything, it breaks up the usual flow of combat and movement in a way that makes the whole section feel more ambitious. Now, I do think that section might be a little more jarring for some people. I can absolutely see some players feeling a bit thrown off by it at first. But for me, it was memorable, and I'd much rather have a game take that kind of swing than play everything safe. Then the EVH reversal kicks in, and honestly, this was one of the most cinematic parts of the mission. You're EVAing through the station's outer arms while missiles and grenades are detonating around you, with debris flying through space and forcing you to dodge as you move. Then the sequence escalates even further while you're knocked away from the station and barely manage to grab back onto it as those giant arms are still in motion. That whole moment was fantastic. It felt tense, cinematic, and perfectly in line with the kind of danger and chaos that makes the Expanse feel like the Expanse. That's the other thing I want to stress here. Yes, this game has some Mass Effect energy in how it handles combat and dialogue. But what makes it feel like the Expanse is the atmosphere. The station setting, the zero-G sections, the corporate menace of Protogen, the sense that everything is spiraling out of control and survival is never guaranteed. That's where its identity really starts to come through. Character-wise, there were a few people who stood out even more in this short slice. Zafar was immediately likable. He just worked right away. Luciana made a stronger first impression on me. Larry felt a little weaker early on, though I'm not sure how much of that was performance and how much of it was just the state we meet him in. The guy looks completely fried after 30 days with no days off, so that may have been the point. Either way, he ends up getting a much stronger moment later on when he takes a hit and seals a door to hold the brutes back from you and Jay. As for Jay, I think the twin dynamic has potential, but with only about an hour of gameplay, I don't think there's enough there yet to really break that down in a major way. What I can say is that Jay feels believable. Jay has a solid personality, and the dynamic feels natural enough so far. But I need to see more before making bigger claims about that relationship or the others. And that's honestly the theme of this whole review. The beta didn't give enough to judge everything, but it gave me enough to see the shape of what Owlcat is building. Now, there were also a few technical critiques worth mentioning. I noticed some texture pop in here and there, along with a few moments where character moments snapped into poses a little abruptly. None of it ruined the experience, but it was noticeable. Earlier in the beta, the final cutscene at the end of the mission would freeze and crash at a certain point. So for a while, I couldn't actually see the full ending from start to finish. But more recently, that issue was fixed, and I was finally able to watch the entire scene properly. It wasn't a big deal, but even that didn't hurt my interest in the game. If anything, it just made me more curious to see the full sequence once it was fixed. As for the brutes, one thing worth clarifying is that you don't really fight them directly in the traditional sense. They're mostly used in cutscenes and as an overwhelming threat. They can't be killed with the weapons that you have, and I actually think that worked well for the mission because it made them feel dangerous rather than just turning them into another enemy type to burn down. By the end, when you're back in the main atrium fighting off waves of enemies while Zafar uses the MATS PDCs to support you, the whole sequence really comes together. When the Protogen antagonist returns with more soldiers and brutes, Zafar uses those guns to buy you just enough time to reach the ship. And then right as you get aboard and prepare to undock, the mat is renamed the Gemini, and you make your escape under fire. And then the mission ends on a very brutal note. The antagonist then goes back to O'Connell, executes him, and orders the station nuked. And that's where the beta ends. That's a strong ending. It leaves you with momentum and with a ton of questions. And more importantly, it leaves you wanting a lot more. That's really my biggest takeaway from all of this. Now, I can't sit here and tell you that the first hour proves the whole game is going to be incredible from start to finish. But I can say that it proves Owlcat understands tone. They know how to pace an opening, how to blend combat, traversal, atmosphere, and cinematic set pieces in a way that stays engaging. And the Expanse Osiris Reborn already feels like a game with a strong identity. I really can't wait for more of this game. I'm genuinely looking forward to seeing where this story goes, what happens with Protogen, how the relationships develop, and how different backgrounds and classes change the experience on another run. And while I know the entire story of the Expanse and its lore, this will be another very interesting perspective of that story. Now, I'm a little sad that we won't be getting the full game until spring of next year, because after this beta, I absolutely want more now. So let me know what you think. Does this sound like the kind of Expanse game that you've been hoping for? And if you were starting your first run, would you go Earther, Martian, or Belter? If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe, because I will definitely be following this game more closely as we get more updates. As always, thanks for watching. Fly safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Havoc out.